The moment she reached for my phone, I knew. She didn't look scared. She looked trained, like she'd practiced this. Her hand went for my screen before I could even hit the lock button, her voice trembling just enough to sound innocent, but not enough to make it real. "Please, just delete it," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder like we were fugitives. I didn't speak. I just stared at her. And him, still sitting on the bench by the fountain, looking down at his shoes like he couldn't decide whether to run or light a cigarette. They didn't see me at first. I had just turned the corner with my coffee, late to pick up dinner, cursing myself for forgetting the coupon Daphne left on the counter. I wasn't supposed to be here, wasn't supposed to see them. But I did. An instinct, or maybe survival, told me to lift my phone and capture it before reality had a chance to blur. Click. Her lips on his. Click. Her hand on his knee. Click. Her smile, the one I hadn't seen in months, aimed at him. That's when she saw me. And now here we were. She was standing in front of me, breathing hard, still wearing the denim jacket I bought her last fall, still smelling like the shampoo we both shared, still lying to me with her whole body. "It was just a moment," she said. "Just a kiss. He's just someone from the studio." It didn't mean anything. But the photo in my hand said otherwise. And when I asked her who he was, she hesitated. Not for long. Just half a second. But it was enough. "Drive me home," she said, barely above a whisper. "I'll explain everything. Please, not here." And like the weak, pathetic man I am, I nodded. But not before hitting save to hidden album. Because I knew she wasn't taking me home to explain. She was taking me home to erase whatever truth I had just captured. And I wasn't going to let her. The drive was silent for the first few minutes, except for the low whine of her breathing and the turn signal clicking like a metronome marking the death of my sanity. I didn't ask questions. She didn't volunteer answers. She just stared out the passenger window like a child after being caught stealing candy, as if guilt alone would earn her forgiveness without the need for truth. My hands gripped the steering wheel hard enough to turn my knuckles white, the same hands that had built her a pottery shelf last Christmas. She never used it. Said she didn't want to clutter the aesthetic of the studio. Now I wondered if she just didn't want anything from me in her space. 5 minutes in, she broke the silence. "His name is Emery." That word lodged in my chest. Emery. It didn't sound real. It sounded like a name you invent in a dream or a soap opera. I didn't respond, just kept my eyes locked on the road like a hostage in my own car. He used to date one of my students. That's how I met him. He came in to pick her up a few times, and we started talking. That was always how these stories began, right? A harmless conversation. A casual laugh. The slow erosion of boundaries disguised as friendship. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. Still no apology. Just passive verbs and soft excuses. Like gravity had pulled her lips to his. I turned down Pine Hollow Road, the long curve that leads to our house. Well, my house, technically. She never wanted to be on the mortgage. Said legal paperwork made her itchy. I used to think that was quirky. Now I think it was strategic. He was going through something, she continued, her voice thin and deliberate. His girlfriend left him. He didn't have anyone to talk to. I finally spoke. My voice was hoarse. "So you offered him your mouth?" She flinched like I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. I wasn't trying to hurt her. Not really. I was just trying to hear how far gone she really was. "I kissed him once. Today," she said. "That's it." I laughed. It came out more like a cough. "I took 3 photos, Daphne." 3. That's not once. She didn't respond. We pulled into the driveway. The porch light was still on, automatic, glowing over a pair of empty boots I hadn't worn since spring. She reached for the door handle, but I hit the lock. Inside, I said, "You're going to tell me everything. And if you lie once, even a single word, I swear, Daphne, I will send those photos to your mother, your brother, and every one of your artsy little friends who think I'm just the boring husband with bad posture." She stared at me like she didn't recognize the man speaking. Maybe she didn't, because something inside me had snapped back at the fountain, something that wasn't going to heal with time or apologies. She nodded slowly. "Okay, but you need to promise you'll listen." I unlocked the door, but what I didn't tell her, what I hadn't told anyone yet, was that I had already sent the photos. To myself, to my old college email, to an encrypted backup, because I had a feeling that whatever she was about to say inside that house wasn't going to be the truth either. The door creaked the same way it always had. That same sharp wooden groan I kept meaning to fix, but never did. Daphne stepped inside first, moving like a prisoner walking into their own cell, head down, arms folded across her stomach like she was shielding herself from something invisible. The porch light clicked off behind me as I followed her in, and for a split second, it felt like the house had exhaled, like even it was sick of the lies. She sat on the edge of the couch, like she didn't want to disturb the cushions too much. I stood. I didn't offer her water. I didn't sit across from her to talk. I leaned against the archway between the living room and the kitchen, arms crossed, phone still in my hand like a loaded weapon. "I'm not going to defend what I did," she began. Her voice was quieter than usual, not softer, just smaller, like someone trying to slip under the radar of consequence. "But I need you to understand something, Ellis. You stopped seeing me months ago." I almost laughed. Classic move. Redirect. Shift the blame. But I didn't speak. I wanted to see where this would go without interrupting the script she'd clearly been rehearsing. "I'd come home from the studio, try to talk to you, and you were either watching something on your laptop or already asleep. I'd ask how your day was, and you'd grunt. I felt invisible, like I was living with a fog." She paused, watching my face for any twitch, any weakness. I gave her nothing. And then Emery came by one day to pick up a piece his ex had ordered. She never picked it up, left him, apparently, just ghosted. He looked broken, worse than you. But he listened. When I talked, he actually heard me. He remembered things I said. He knew how to ask the right questions without making it about himself. "So you rewarded him with your mouth?" I asked again, quieter this time. She flinched. "You don't get to be cruel. Not when you weren't even there anymore, Ellis." I stepped forward. I didn't kiss anyone else. I didn't sneak around parks and lie about studio hours. I didn't throw away a 7-year marriage because some stranger happened to ask me how I was feeling. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her jaw worked silently, like she was chewing on regret, but not ready to swallow it. "I only kissed him," she said eventually. "Nothing else. Nothing physical beyond that. I swear." That word, swear, it hit differently when you no longer trusted the lips saying it. I looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes were red, but dry. Her hands were shaking, but not trembling with fear. With anger, maybe, or frustration that her carefully managed lie had unraveled so fast. "I don't believe you," I said. "Not because I want to punish you, but because you're too calm." She laughed, a brittle, cracking sound. "You think I'm calm? Ellis, I'm trying not to fall apart." "No," I said. "You're trying not to lose control of the story." That shut her up. I walked past her and sat in the chair we bought during our first year in this house. The one she said looked like something a grandfather would read war novels in. I suddenly liked that chair a lot more. "So let's pretend," I said. "Let's pretend that you're telling the truth. Just a kiss. One bad moment. Nothing else. Then answer me this. Daphne, why did your phone have a hotel reservation confirmation from 2 nights ago?" Her eyes went wide for exactly 1 second before the mask slipped back on. "You went through my phone?" she asked, deflecting again. Desperate now. "I didn't have to. You left it on the kitchen island 2 nights ago. Your Gmail notification popped up. I saw the subject line. I tapped it before I could think. Hilton Bay Garden Inn, Queen Suite confirmation. Dated for Thursday night. You told me you were staying late to prep for a bridal expo." Silence. This time she didn't flinch. She froze. I stood again, this time slowly, letting the moment hang between us like smoke. "So, you gonna tell me what's so friendly about a hotel suite?" Daphne looked down at her lap, then up at the ceiling. Her lips parted, then closed again. I watched her try to find a version of the truth that would hurt less. But it was too late for soft landings. She didn't answer. Instead, she stood up slowly, like her bones had suddenly turned to stone. Her eyes didn't meet mine, not yet. She walked toward the window, staring out like there was something important happening in the empty driveway. But I knew better. That was the move you make when you're cornered and you need time to lie creatively. She was looking out that window like the truth might be hiding behind the mailbox. "I wasn't going to go," she said finally, her voice low but perfectly steady. "I booked the room just in case." "In case what?" I said. "In case he needed a place to cry?" She turned sharply. "You're not being fair." That sentence, "you're not being fair," echoed in my head louder than anything else she'd said all night. After everything I'd seen, after all the lies and gaslighting and quiet betrayals, She still had the gall to accuse me of being unfair. I nearly laughed, but it would have come out sounding like a man who'd finally cracked. You booked a hotel suite, lied to me about why, met up with him anyway, and kissed him in public like I was dead. And you're going to talk to me about fairness? I didn't go through with it, she snapped, finally raising her voice. Yes, I booked the room. Yes, I was tempted. But when the night came, I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes and left. I couldn't do it. That has to count for something. I stared at her for a moment, studying every twitch, every breath, every second of delay between her sentences. It was rehearsed, maybe not the emotion, but the structure of the story. She had built a narrative that minimized guilt but still left room for sympathy. She was trying to thread the needle, just enough honesty to sound believable, just enough denial to keep me from leaving. That doesn't count for anything, I said flatly. Do you know what it felt like reading that reservation confirmation while sitting on the same couch where we carved pumpkins last fall? Do you know what it's like to realize your wife has backup plans for her infidelity? I didn't sleep with him, she whispered. If that's what you want to hear. I stood up and walked past her, into the kitchen. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Maybe distance, maybe composure. I opened the fridge out of habit, stared into the cold void like a man checking for a sign from God in a bottle of mustard. Nothing. I closed it and leaned against the counter, the same one where we used to make midnight pancakes and laugh about terrible movies. You didn't sleep with him yet, I said. You had a hotel room reserved. That's not a flirt. That's not a mistake. That's logistics. That's intention. She walked in behind me, barefoot, still hugging her arms like she was freezing. You don't know how lonely I've been, she said, like it was a secret only she had earned the right to feel. You stopped touching me, stopped listening. You act like I'm the only one who failed here. I am the only one who's still standing here, I said, turning toward her. I'm the only one who didn't lie. I didn't check out. I didn't stray. I didn't make a hotel reservation as a backup plan for attention. I've been here. In this house. In this relationship. You want to talk about loneliness? Try screaming into the void every night and pretending it's a conversation. Her lip trembled then. A part of me, the oldest, softest part, wanted to reach out, to comfort her. But that part of me was dying fast. She looked at the floor, then at me. So what now? You want me to pack a bag? Is this it? No, I said. Not yet. Because I need to know exactly how long this has been going on. I want the entire timeline, Daphne. From the first message to the last lie. She didn't answer right away. Then she walked to the table, sat down, and sighed like she was about to recite a confession she'd rehearsed 1,000 times but never dared to say out loud. Okay, she said, meeting my eyes. But I need to tell you something first. Something you're not going to like. There was a silence between us thick enough to drown in. Emery isn't who you think he is, she said. He's not just some guy. You've met him before. And just like that, the ground under me cracked wide open. I didn't sit down. Couldn't. I felt my knees loosen, but I forced them straight. Not because I was holding on to strength, but because I was afraid that if I sat, I wouldn't be able to get back up. My throat felt dry. Her words hovered in the air, too soft for what they carried, too gentle for what they meant. Emery isn't who you think he is. You've met him before. What do you mean I've met him? I asked, my voice sharp, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. She hesitated, biting her bottom lip. Not in some flirtatious way, but like someone trying to keep their own secrets from spilling out too fast. Then, slowly she said it. He's Levi's older brother. Everything inside me stopped. Levi, my old coworker, my friend, the guy who helped me get the promotion I didn't deserve 3 years ago. The guy who invited us both to his wedding in Vermont, the one we couldn't make because Daphne said she'd booked a clay workshop that same weekend. I remember her being unusually cold about it. Didn't want to fly, didn't want to spend the money, didn't even send a gift. I let it slide. I always let things slide. Levi's brother? I said, barely above a whisper. You mean the one who was at the company Christmas party? The one I introduced you to? She nodded. Her face was pale now, and I could tell she regretted saying it. Not because it wasn't true, but because she'd just realized how deep this would cut. I remembered that party vividly now. Levi's brother was tall, quiet, said he'd just moved back to Oregon. He wore a blazer that didn't fit and kept checking his phone. I remember shaking his hand and joking that he looked like someone who hated people for fun. He didn't laugh, just looked at Daphne and said, "You must be the wife." You've known him since then? I asked, and she nodded again. You've been in contact with him for 2 years. Not like that, she said quickly. At first it was just occasional. I ran into him again at a farmer's market. He remembered me, we chatted, and I didn't think anything of it. It didn't turn into whatever this is until maybe 6 months ago. Whatever this is. The way she said it made me want to knock every dish off the table. I didn't. But the rage was bubbling under the surface now, no longer a bruise. It was a fire looking for oxygen. So you remembered him, I said. You ran into him accidentally. And then what? You just kept meeting up? Kept playing house in the park while I was paying the mortgage? It wasn't like that, she said, and I could tell she was reaching. It started slow. We texted a few times. Then he showed up at the studio once. Said he was looking for a gift for Levi. We talked for a while. He listened. There it was again, that word. Listened. Like it was some magical loophole that made emotional infidelity romantic instead of cruel. Like the fact that he remembered what her favorite candle scent was meant he deserved parts of her that were supposed to be mine. I walked into the hallway and opened the coat closet, not even sure why. Maybe I needed space. Maybe I needed to see if the world still looked the same. Inside was the wool scarf Daphne had knitted for me the first year we were married. She hadn't touched her knitting bag in months. Did Levi know? I asked. She didn't answer. I turned around. Did he know his own brother was hooking up with his friend's wife? Her silence said more than words ever could. You're unbelievable, I said. You lied to your husband, betrayed your friend, dragged his family into this, and you still think you're the victim in all this. I never said I was the victim, she replied, almost defensively. But I'm not the monster you're trying to make me into either. I shook my head slowly. You cheated on me with a man whose hand I shook, whose brother I worked beside for 3 years, who sat across from me at a barbecue and smiled like he hadn't already marked you. Her face flushed. It wasn't planned like that. Don't. I cut her off. Don't try to rewrite it. I introduced you to him. You took that introduction and twisted it into a fantasy. You nurtured it. You fed it while I was busy keeping our real life afloat. You made this. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. She looked like she wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. And maybe that was the most honest thing about her. Even her remorse was performative. I need you to leave, I said finally. Just for tonight. I need space. I need air that hasn't been contaminated. She looked up, startled. You want me to leave our house? No, I said. I want you to leave my house. The one you stopped treating like home the second you invited someone else into it, emotionally or otherwise. For once, she didn't argue. She grabbed her keys in silence and walked out the door without a word, without a suitcase, without even her phone charger. And for a second, I wondered if she had somewhere else to go. Someone else waiting. Someone who already had a Queen Suite bookmarked. I didn't follow. I didn't even watch her pull out of the driveway. Instead, I sat down in the dark kitchen, the fridge humming quietly behind me, and I stared at the corner where we used to hang our photos. I'd taken them down last week, saying I wanted to repaint. But maybe I already knew. Maybe I'd known long before the kiss. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the idea that every memory might now be retroactively poisoned. Every smile a disguise, every touch a delay tactic. Emery wasn't just a stranger now. He was a symbol, a before and after, a name that would live inside this house even after she was gone. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Because people like Emery don't just disappear. And women like Daphne, they don't fall in love by accident. The house felt different the second she left. Quieter, yes, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence you get after a car crash, when your ears are still ringing and your brain hasn't caught up yet. I walked through the living room and turned off the lamp she always left on, then stopped halfway up the stairs and just stood there, gripping the railing, listening. To what? I didn't know. Maybe to the air she used to occupy. Maybe to the echoes of old arguments we never really finished. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with my clothes still on, staring at the ceiling, the room lit only by the weak glow of the streetlight outside the window. My phone buzzed once around midnight. An unknown number, no message. I didn't answer. I didn't care if it was her. I didn't want to hear the voice that had said, "He's not just some guy." That voice was no longer welcome in my home, or in my head. But at 2:17 a.m., I heard something that made my blood run cold. It came from downstairs. A soft thud, then something like glass being gently nudged. Not breaking, not loud, just movement. Deliberate. Measured. I sat up, heartbeat pounding. At first, I told myself it could have been the fridge. The ice maker sometimes dumped with a dull clunk, though it hadn't done that in years. I waited, frozen, listening harder. Another sound. The faint scrape of something metallic. A hinge? A drawer? I slipped quietly out of bed and grabbed the flashlight I kept in the closet, along with the small aluminum bat I'd used for Little League coaching a few summers back. The bat felt absurd in my hand, but it was something, and right now, something was better than nothing. As I crept downstairs, every step felt louder than it should have. The old wood groaned under my weight, betraying me to whoever, or whatever, was in the house. But when I turned the corner into the kitchen, it was empty. Still, my heart didn't settle. Then I saw it, the studio door. The small side room we'd converted into Daphne's pottery workspace. She hadn't used it much in recent months, claimed she preferred working from the shop. The door was cracked open just enough for me to see the edge of the work table. I moved slowly, bat raised, light off. I pushed the door open with my foot. The room was empty, but something wasn't right. A faint smell of lavender and clay lingered, familiar. But beneath it, a sharper scent, cologne. Not mine. Not any I'd ever worn. That cold, clean, synthetic kind. The sort that clings to car upholstery and hotel pillows. And then I saw it. Sitting neatly on the corner of the table was a folded piece of paper. No envelope. Just creased down the center. My name written in her handwriting. Ellis. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it like it might explode. Then I turned it over. Nothing on the back. My pulse kicked up as I unfolded the page. There were only 2 lines, written in the same fast, neat script she always used when labeling spice jars. I wasn't going to tell you about the second room. I still might not. But if you find this, it means I panicked. That was it. No signature. No explanation. Just enough to ignite a new wildfire in my chest. I looked around the room again. The shelves, the unfinished pieces, the cold tools scattered neatly along the counter. Everything felt too placed, too intentional. She had come back here after leaving, and I hadn't heard her. Or worse, someone else had. The second room. What second room? A hotel? A rental? Somewhere she met him? Or something else entirely? My mind spun out in every direction, too fast to follow. Was this her way of baiting me? Warning me? Apologizing? Or was it just manipulation? Her last attempt to stay in my head even after I'd pushed her out of the house? I looked around again and noticed one more thing I hadn't seen at first. A slip of paper poking out from under a clay mold near the sink. I picked it up. A receipt. Dated 4 days ago. 2 items. A burner phone and a prepaid Visa card. Paid in cash. My hands went cold. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning something. And I wasn't sure if it was still about love, or if this had turned into something else entirely. I didn't sleep after that. I didn't even go back upstairs. I just sat at the kitchen table with the letter and the burner phone receipt in front of me, staring at them like they were puzzle pieces from 2 different boxes. The words kept replaying in my head. I wasn't going to tell you about the second room. I couldn't stop thinking about the phrasing. It wasn't "I didn't tell you" or "I lied about a second room." It was phrased like an unfinished decision, like she'd been wrestling with whether to reveal it at all. And she only left the note if she panicked. So what had made her panic? The sun was rising through the blinds by the time I finally opened my laptop. I had no idea what I was even looking for, but I started with the only concrete detail I had, the receipt. The store was a convenience chain 2 towns over, not one we ever visited. I pulled up their website, scanned through their locations. Store number 207, listed right off Route 29, behind a rundown gas station and a vape shop. I remembered that strip. We'd driven past it on the way to her cousin's wedding last spring. She had asked me to stop so she could get gum. I said no because we were already running late. That memory used to feel small. Now it felt surgical. I searched the phone number of the store. Nothing. I checked our bank statements. Of course, the receipts said cash, so nothing there. But while scrolling through the bank history, something caught my eye. A $74 charge at a print shop 3 days ago. Not a place we used. In fact, I'd never even heard of it. A place called Sunridge Imaging. At first I thought maybe it was for her pottery business, maybe flyers or signage. But I checked their site. They didn't make promotional materials. They specialized in one thing: ID cards, lanyards, badges, credentials. And my blood ran ice cold. Why would she be printing identification? I called the number from their website, got a recording, They opened at 9. It was barely 7. So I waited. I drank bitter black coffee and listened to the refrigerator hum while my head spun in every direction. What was she preparing for? Who was helping her? And had I really been this blind? At 9:01 I called again. This time, someone answered, an older-sounding woman with a clipped, professional tone. I gave her Daphne's full name and said I was calling about a recent order. "I'm sorry," she said. "We only release that kind of information to the ordering party." I was about to hang up when she added, "Unless it's a corporate account. Then we confirm with HR first." "Wait," I said. "Corporate?" "Yes," she replied casually. She said she worked for a consulting firm. We put their logo on the card. Blue Horizon Consulting? Or Blue something? I hung up before I could ask anything else. My mouth had gone dry. I'd never heard of Blue Horizon anything. Daphne didn't work in consulting. She worked with clay, with brides, with paint and glaze and overpriced soy candles she pretended she didn't buy in bulk. What the hell was she doing with an ID badge from a fake company? I grabbed my jacket and keys, heart pounding. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to move, to get out of the house before the walls collapsed inward. I drove, not toward the studio, not toward her shop, but toward the one place I hadn't thought to check, her storage unit. We'd rented it a year ago when she said she needed space for extra supplies. I'd only been there once, to help her carry in a shelf. Since then, she always went alone. I remembered the unit number, B17. I remembered the gate code. I still paid for it. Ironic, in retrospect. When I arrived, the lot was empty. Quiet. Early morning cold settled around my shoulders as I parked, walked up the narrow concrete corridor, and found her unit. The lock was old school. Key, not combo, but I had a spare. She didn't know that. I'd kept it on my spare keyring, mostly out of laziness. Now it felt like the one smart thing I'd done in months. The key turned. The door rolled open. And I froze. Inside, instead of clay or tools or shelves of old art, there were 2 plastic bins stacked next to a folding table. On the table sat a manila envelope, an open laptop, and a small stack of printed documents held together with a black binder clip. And right there, on the top page, bold, unmistakable, was my name, Ellis Grant. Above it, in smaller font, emergency contact, target subject, spousal profile. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I stepped closer, reached for the document with shaking fingers. My photo was there. An old one, probably pulled from my company's employee portal. The file listed things I didn't even remember telling her. My high school GPA, my old address from when I lived in Reno, my first dog's name. It read like a psychological profile. Favorite color, risk tolerance, conflict patterns. Underlined in red, passive, loyal, suspicious of confrontation. I couldn't move, couldn't think. I looked down at the other pages. One had a flowchart, deployment path A/path B. Another showed dates and GPS coordinates. Another was a blank resignation form, with my name typed out. And then, the last page. A note, handwritten in the bottom corner. If he asks about Emory, deny deeper links. Hold path B until he confirms emotional fracture. I dropped the papers like they burned. She wasn't just cheating. She was working a plan. I didn't leave the storage unit right away. I sat there on a cold plastic stool next to her twisted little archive of secrets, breathing shallow and fast like someone who'd just emerged from a burning building. For a while I didn't even process what I'd found. I just stared at my own face on the paper, my life, my habits, my mind, laid out like I was a lab experiment. Someone's project. Daphne had profiled me. That part was obvious. But this wasn't just about an affair. This was structured, methodical. She hadn't just fallen out of love. She'd built an exit plan that treated me like a variable. It felt like I had never been real to her at all. But what surprised me wasn't the rage. It was the calm. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a switch had flipped. I was done playing the stunned husband, the man begging for scraps of truth. I wasn't going to chase her anymore. Not for answers. Not for closure. Not even for revenge. I knew what she'd done. And now I knew what I had to do. I took a photo of every page, calmly, methodically, like she had. Then I packed the papers back exactly how I found them, relocked the unit, and drove home with the windows down, breathing in cold air like medicine. The sun had crested over the hills, casting that sharp, early morning gold across everything. It was the first time in weeks I actually noticed the light. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I didn't go to social media. I didn't rage post on forums. I opened a blank document and began typing. A timeline. Notes. Names. I didn't know where it would go yet, but I knew it needed to start with truth. Then I drafted an email to myself from a new account, encrypted, backed up twice. I included the photos, the documents, the flowchart. Then I wrote a single sentence. If I ever forget what she did, open this and remember how deliberate it was. And then I stood up, stretched, and made pancakes. For the first time in a while, I made them how I like them, a little crispy on the edges, no blueberries, and way too much syrup. I sat by the window and watched birds fight over seed on the feeder she'd bought, but never filled. That afternoon, I called my brother. We hadn't spoken in months, not because we fought, just because I always said I was too busy. We talked for nearly an hour. He didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer any. But we laughed like we hadn't in years. I didn't hear from Daphne for 3 days. Then, on a quiet Thursday evening, she sent a single text. I assume you found the file. I'm sorry for everything. You didn't deserve it. I stared at the screen for a full minute. And then I deleted the message. No reply. No response. She was a chapter now. A strange, disturbing, unforgettable chapter, but not my whole book. The next week, I changed the locks. I donated the things she left behind. I called a lawyer. I went to therapy. I slept. I started breathing from my chest again, not just my throat. And little by little, I returned to myself. Not the same version. Not the one who ignored the signs or accepted half-love, but a sharper version. A quieter one. Someone who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone who doesn't choose him fully. A month later, I visited a gallery in town. I'd passed it dozens of times, always in a rush, always preoccupied. This time I walked in, and that's where I met someone. Not romantically, not right away. Just a kind woman with ink-stained hands and a loud laugh who asked if I wanted to take a beginner's drawing class. I said yes, and she smiled like I'd just told her a secret. Her name was Sarah. She didn't remind me of Daphne at all, and that was the point.